afternoon. This is Minister Michael Muhammad coming to you again on behalf of the Street Peace Coalition. I am one of the co-founders of the Street Peace Coalition. We are a grassroots violence intervention prevention organization, and we come to you every week for our third season. This season we're on at 5 p.m. This is our third season on Chicago Cable Channel 21 on the Comcast on the Comcast network. So each week we host this show, this live call-in show. We're happy to take your calls at 312-738-1060. We come to you to talk about issues related to violence, specifically violence in the black community. And so for the last several weeks, I've been trying to lay out the case or the nature of violence in the black community and how it connects with violence in America in general. And as we see on the news, there's always an episode of some type of heinous act of violence, whether it's in the black community or otherwise. And so we are speaking to you today in the aftermath of a horrendous mass shooting inside of a church by someone who obviously is a very evil, sick, demented person. But let's go back to our material. So we want to be consistent in laying out what we're laying out about violence and how it relates to black people. And so I want to talk to you very quickly. I'm going to go through what I'm going to term the seven-headed monster that produces violence in the black community. The seven-headed monster that produces violence in the black community. And this seven-headed monster is seven prime social institutions, organs of society and government that have deliberately targeted black people, specifically the black family, and more narrowly black men, for the breakup of the black family through dislodging and dislocating black fathers from being able to effectively father, husband, maintain, provide, and protect their families. And so I want to start with Chicago Public Schools. Chicago Public Schools, we start there because school is the second prime social institution of our habilitation. We leave parents at the age of 4 or 5 or 6, and parents turn us over to some kind of school, some type of formal educational setting, which we hope will mirror or mimic or improve the values and standards and the habilitation we've already received at home as developing children. School is there to not only give us our ABCs, our multiplication, facts, figures, and formal education in terms of book knowledge. It is also there to aid, to be a primary aid and assist in socializing us, to prepare us, instilling in us discipline and boundaries and values that will make us productive as human beings, make us an asset to the human family and the society in which we live. So schools are very critical. And here in Chicago, the Chicago public school system has had the privilege, the honor, and the duty of educating the vast majority of young black life for generations. And so currently the Chicago Public Schools has a $5.5 billion budget. But out of that budget, you will find that, as I've said, the approach to black people has always been crime and punishment. And this is true even in the Chicago public school system. So out of that $5.5 billion budget that is reported, over $80 million is allocated just to security. And so when you go to Chicago public schools now, most of them on the south and the west sides of Chicago, you will find a police state in the hallways of Chicago public school system, because we have set up a paradigm where the black family being under assault, black children now have no respect for authority, no concept of respect for elders, and so there is a social norm among young black people that the adults that populate administrative and educational positions in Chicago public schools don't know how to handle. And so out of that over $5 billion budget, there's over $80 million just to school security. There's almost another $30 million allocated to what is called safe passage, along with the dismantling under the current administration of over 50 schools in Chicago being closed, and hundreds, if you will, of strong, capable, competent black teachers being expelled from the system, and a transference of wealth from public schools, quote unquote, to charter schools, which are semi-private institutions that are funded with public dollars. You had a transference of over $85 million from Chicago public schools general into charter schools, coupled with $164 million being cut to the regular schools. You have a financial gutting of Chicago public schools. You have a administrative pilfering of the best talent that is most suitable to educate and reform or acculturate young black people. They have been pushed out of the system, all while all the time there has been a redirect of resources from quality educators and quality education into the militarization of Chicago public schools. And so from an early age, as we enter Chicago public schools from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, there's a militarization, a focus on crime and punishment, a focus on fundamental testing, which is another form of, is really a indirect attachment to crime and punishment, because our young people are turned off by an educational system that focuses on testing and not real culturally relevant, cultural competent education. So this disconnects especially young black men from an interest in education, and they're already now immersed in a police state inside of the school, combined with deteriorated social conditions in their respective neighborhoods. They're being set up or being socialized to be prepared to engage the prison industrial complex from an early age. And you look at CPS with a $5.5 billion budget, and you go over to CPD, Chicago Police Department, with over a $1 billion, $300 million budget, which is primarily focused on the black community on the south and the west sides. And so taxes in Chicago are high, and a lion's share of that is justified under the name of crime and punishment, under the theme of crime and punishment, using black suffering to justify the exploitation of the taxpayers' money by the current administration to redirect more money back into policing when the police department has been grossly mismanaged, when the police department's resources have been unaccounted for in many ways, when the police department has a long-standing history of, it has paid out over $600 million in direct settlements to individuals in the city whose family members have been murdered, brutalized, and falsely incarcerated by the Chicago Police Department. But all of this is happening at the same time that this activity is going on in Chicago public school system. So those are two of the seven-headed monsters. But let's look at a third seven-headed monster. Now I'm running through this because all of these dots connect. When you look at the phenomenon that is going on in the black community in specifics in Chicago, this violence is not happening in a vacuum. The behavior of our young people is not a product of young people themselves. This is the byproduct of social and economic engineering at the hands of wickedly wise, corrupt policymakers and elected officials and others who have always demonized and exploited black and brown people. And so the conversation about our crime is different than it is about white crime. And so I'm trying to give you some facts and data to help you understand how these critical social institutions are behind socially engineered violence in the black community. Okay, the third of the seven-headed monster I want to mention is the Chicago Housing Authority, CHA. CHA currently or recently has been in the news for accumulating over somewhere between $400 and $500 million in surplus cash reserves. And this happened because CHA determined that it would demolish over 20,000 units of housing in the city of Chicago and cause the mass exodus of poor black people out of concentrated Chicago public housing into scattered sites, disperse them into neighborhoods that otherwise did not have high concentrations of people who were a part of the Section 8 program, affordable housing program that come through Chicago Housing Authority. And so all of the culture that was concentrated in Chicago public housing was dispersed now throughout the city, which created a shift in a change in these neighborhoods that had their own culture, their own hegemony, if you will, as neighborhoods. Now you had a flood of thousands of people coming in from Chicago public housing into neighborhoods where they had no history, they had no historical connection, they had no familiar connection. Now they bring in a certain mentality that now causes tension, friction, hostility, violence, crime, and even murder in these neighborhoods, all because of the policies of Chicago Housing Authority, which at the end of the day was designed to make it lucrative for its contractors, which was designed to be punitive toward poor black people, feeling as though poor black people had already received enough, they didn't need any more. Now we need to use public housing and the resources thereof to accumulate wealth for the system and then redistribute that wealth in the name of redevelopment to white contractors, to white vendors, and even many white families who were able now to get housing and whatnot through Chicago Housing Authority programs at the expense of poor black people. So a further attack on the black family. Now let's jump to DCFS. Department of Children and Family Services, as we know it most popularly. You're talking about an institution that receives almost $200 million in federal funds to deal with black children who, for whatever reason, find themselves in the care of children and family services because of a dysfunctional family, no family connections or no responsible family connections. They become the responsibility of the state. So DCFS, as we know it, is responsible for over 16,000 young black people. Okay. They add, in the last few years, they've added $16 million annually to their budget. But you don't have the media, mainstream media, talking about the mishandling of black children, the abuse, the neglect of black children, the toxic, poisonous, racist, hostile attitude of staff and administrators in DCFS when it comes to handling young black children who, through no fault of their own, do not have parents in many cases at all who will step up and provide for them the love, nurturing, and attention that they deserve as young people. And so you have DCFS, you have CHA, you have Chicago Police Department, and you have Chicago Public Schools. But let's move on to IDOC, the Illinois Department of Corrections, is another part of this seven-headed monster that is directly involved in the exploitation of black people, the destruction of the black family, and the proliferation of violence in the black community. IDOC has almost a $4.5 billion budget, almost a $1.5 billion budget annually. Okay. Most of those incarcerated in IDOC, of course, as we know, are black males. Okay. If there are, and so IDOC puts in place practices and policies that are not designed to reform those that it incarcerates. It's actually designed, if you ever engage IDOC, these institutions are designed to double, triple, quadruple down in an environment that makes men who are incarcerated worse than they were when they went in for the first time. And so there's a high recidivism rate. The care or the quality of the experience of the incarcerated is designed to make them more hostile, more brutal, more savage, more unruly, more prone to violence than they were when they went in. And the policies that are used to handle those that are incarcerated actually is very culpable in the destruction of the ability of black men to reform themselves, even when they make minor mistakes. In fact, over 65% of those in IDOC are there because of drug possession, minor drug possession, not kingpin drug levels, not distribution drug levels, but enough drugs for you to use in a week. Enough drugs for you to use in a few days, you get stiff sentences. Batteries, fights, domestic assaults, you get stiff sentences. You have young people there, first offense, no criminal background, getting 30, 40, 50, up to 60 and 70 years for first time offenses. This is by in cahoots with the criminal justice system, of course. But I have a caller. Caller, go. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am.
Oh, go ahead.
Ray.
All right, Ray.
You know what about DCFS? Why would the mayor of this city care about DCFS or let the people know how bad it is? He's going to keep that quiet. He was on TV today talking all kind of good things about Chicago. There are no good things about Chicago anymore. And I grew up in this city. I'm 69 years old. Now, about the guys that drugs, they know that the system is rigged against them. So they have to think twice before acting. Otherwise, it's going to keep up. Your mayor ain't going to say nothing. Your aldermen aren't going to say nothing. The only people that are going to say something are the people that tell you to line up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, I agree with the caller. I want to get through with this seven-headed monster before I run out of time. I was just talking about IDOC. My last point on IDOC is that, blacks are about 15% of the population, with 60% of those incarcerated. Black men are roughly around 4 to 6% of the population, but we are somewhere around 70% of those incarcerated in IDOC. County jail, the same scenario. Okay, I'm not going to spend a long time on county jail, but I want to lay this out for you to show you that this seven-headed monster starts locally. It affects us at the county level and the state level. And lastly, it affects us at the federal level through the DEA. Okay, the DEA, again, makes 1.5 million drug arrests each year. 81% of those arrested are for simple possession. Only 18% of those arrested by the DEA are arrested for the manufacture of narcotics. And blacks are arrested at a 3 to 5.5 times higher rate than whites. And we're 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than anybody else in the society. All of this is policy. Focus on the destruction of black men and the black family. The White House. I'll come back to the White House because I'm running out of time. But I want you to understand this seven-headed monster. CPS, CHA, DCFS, CPD, IDOC, the DEA, and the White House. I want you to understand that when you see this atrocious behavior on the part of a minor percentage of black youth, this is not by accident. Our youth did not make themselves hostile. They didn't make themselves angry. They didn't give themselves the guns and the weapons. This is all a orchestrated policy. This is provable by the facts reported by these institutions on themselves. Okay, we have to look past the media hype and look at the facts. We've got to do our homework. And so before I go off the air, I want to encourage you to get involved with us. I'm going to flash our contact information real quick. If you want to get involved with the Street Peace Coalition, you can reach us there on Facebook. You can hit our website and link up with us. We need your support. We need volunteers, and we need whatever support you're willing to give to help us deal with violence. I also want to mention an event that's coming up on November 18th. If you're the leader of a community organization or you're an activist, you're going to want to participate with us along with the New Black Leadership Coalition in the United Black Leadership Quarterly Roundtable, which is happening November 18th. At 1:30 at the Prince Hall Lodge on 809 East 42nd Place. This is a quarterly meeting for activists, organizers, and organizational leaders where we're trying to come together on a regular basis to formulate strategies and create more of a unified front as it pertains to issues that affect the black family and the black community. And so I'm just about out of time. I want to thank our regular caller Ray and any other viewers that tune in to us every week. Those who view us on social media, we appreciate you checking us out. And until next week, this is Minister Michael Muhammad signing off for the Street Peace Coalition. Peace.